Hey, really excited on Ralphie tonight and New York's 95.5 PLJ to welcome into the studio a very prolific TV producer who has a new book out. It's called I Was Saved by the Bell, Stories of Life, Love, and Dreams That Do Come True. Of course, credited with a number of TV shows, probably the biggest being, of course, Last Comic Standing, and a show that I grew up with, Saved by the Bell. Mr. Peter Engel, welcome back to New York City.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Ralphie.
I live...
Are you a Bell generation?
31 years old, so yeah.
Like my kids.
You know, I can remember, certainly we'll talk about this a little bit. I mean, I can remember being in school and, you know, we have a group of friends and this show was so impactful on my generation that you almost looked at your group of friends, which I'm sure you've heard this a million times, and it's like, okay, which one's the Zach? Which one's the Screech? Which one's the AC Slater? And the girls do the same thing. And it's, you know, sadly I was a Screech. And thankfully I didn't grow up to be Screech, which was kind of nice too. But, you know, it had that kind of impact on our generation, so thank you.
You're welcome. It's funny, because when I used to meet, you know, women who are now in their 30s, I go, "Were you a Zach girl or a Slater girl?" But I could tell I could tell who was a Zach girl and who was a Slater girl without them saying a thing.
Welcome back to New York City, as I mentioned. I live about 10 blocks from where you grew up, on the Upper West Side.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I was at the El Dorado.
What are your memories of growing up there on 90th and Central Park West?
It was, we had make-believe games. We were across from Central Park, of course, but mainly on 91st Street we played punch ball and stickball with a Spalding. And then the lobby of the El Dorado was a huge lobby. It had 2 big towers and 4 towers, actually. And we would try and play hockey in our stocking feet with hockey sticks and a tennis ball until they threw us out. But it was always lots of kids on 91st playing stickball or punch ball.
I know you left New York a number of years ago. When you come back and you maybe return back to the Upper West Side, I was thinking about it earlier. Probably the area that has changed the least is Central Park West, because it's not. It never was commercial, right? It was always residential.
Right.
Everything else has got to look completely different to you.
Right. And I went to NYU. I used to take the subway down from 90th Street down to NYU, and then at 3 o'clock, my junior and senior year, I would take the subway up to 30 Rock, and I was an NBC page. And tomorrow, I'm doing a book signing at the NBC studio store where I began.
Now, we've seen a number of different things about Saved by the Bell. It's been dissected. There's been rumors. There's been other there's been tell-alls. There's been books. And now, of course, you come out with a book. I would assume, having not read the book, I would assume that the fact that you're doing a signing at the NBC store signals that they're probably cool with at least most of what you said in the book, if not all of it.
Well, the book's about 25% about Saved by the Bell. But it's my journey to have a hit show and having my heart broken so many times, shows that coulda, woulda, shoulda, wouldn't have, and finally finding success, or the success I craved, in the most unusual place, something I didn't want to do. I didn't want to do a Saturday morning show. Who was going to watch a Saturday morning show? And my ex-wife said, "How about your kids?" And I said, "Oh, I guess I made a mistake when I told them to get someone else." And the New York Times asked me 2 years later, we were in 85 countries and on 97 times a week. And what'd you say? What a good idea. I said, no. I told them to get someone else. And then, of course, once I got into it and I wrote the first episode and many of the episodes and supervised all of them, it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Was the success of Saved by the Bell addicting? Is that what led you then to really kind of create this new block of programming that would set a precedent for television?
Well, we had 2 Saved by the Bells by this 3rd year. We had Saved by the Bell in school, and then we had The Adventures, where we went to Palm Desert, we went to the beach club, and etc. It was new fertile ground and a new audience. No one had ever measured the 12 to 17 audience. And of course, it's spread at both ends, 17 to 21 and 12 down to 9 probably. But it was always 2 to 6 and 7 to 14. So no one was ever, and the ratings were never studying or tracking the teens and preteens, which we call tweens. Yeah, it was Why Not Do Another, California Dreams, Hang Time, which, there's a show with Mark Paul Gosselaar now on Fox called Pitch about a girl. I already did that show called Hang Time, a girl on a boys basketball
Right.
team. And then, of course, we did City Guys, which is one of my favorites.
Now, you mentioned your journey being really what this book is about. And that, I mean, even if you remove Saved by the Bell, I found your journey to be quite interesting. You grow up here in New York City, as you mentioned, NYU, Page at NBC, move out to LA. I hear about people, they grow up Christian or Catholic and they convert to Judaism. You went the opposite way.
Yeah, but I never stopped being a Jew.
Well, you don't, right? Well, my maternal grandmother's Jewish.
Right.
So even though I was raised Catholic, technically I'm still a Jew as well.
Right.
But I guess what led to those events, and I would imagine that's something you talk about in the book,
yeah,
right?
It's a chapter of the book called God is Nice. And the night it changed my life. I had an experience where Jesus, who I never believed in, made jokes about, those who did believe in, came. I was living at Malibu in a very... not a good time in my life. I had a drug problem. And for some reason, that week I wasn't on anything. And I had an experience with Jesus coming into my room. And I thought, I started to tell people about it. And they said, you better get to rehab. Now, when I was doing drugs, none of my friends ever said you needed to go to rehab. But when I told them that Jesus, well, I didn't know it was Jesus, God came into my room, they said, you better get to rehab. And then months later, I met somebody and it told me I wasn't crazy. And then I went through a whole new lifestyle and a total new life belief. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, even better than Saved by the Bell.
Well, that's certainly a life-changing experience, no question. And then when you have an experience like that, it's got to put, again, I mentioned earlier a lot of the things that have come out about Saved by the Bell since the show. There's been such a fascination with it because of how popular it's been. A lot of people, I think, look back to Dustin Diamond's book that he released, I believe, in 2010, 2011. And he had some not so flattering things to say about yourself and about some people that you care about, your colleagues. When you have a life-changing experience like that, I've seen like Mario Lopez on camera with Dustin since, and it seems like they kind of made up, at least for the cameras they did. Does it make it easier for you to forgive others then for what they've said? Or, are you holding grudges here about any of this? Or?
No, not at all. I mean, people do. They were young. He was trying to grasp, I guess. I mean, he went into stand-up. He was with me 11 years. When I brought him back for the Save the Bell new class to save it, as the assistant principal, he wasn't even old enough to have graduated high school. He was 11 when he started with us. I misread his birthday. And he never really, the other kids were 14 and 15. There's a big difference between 11 and 14. It's not like 14 and 15. And he was never socially, on the show, he was a star, but, and I understand he left Bell after 11 years with me. Had me laughing all 11 years. We're doing the movie in Las Vegas. I burst out laughing, but it was a movie for film. And I would burst out laughing and ruin the tape because he had me laughing all the time. Then he wanted to do stand-up, and the audience expected Screech. And he didn't do Screech, and there was conflict. And I would assume at this point of this book or some of the other things, he was reaching for an anchor, something to propel a career that started when he was 11, and now he's in his late 20s. And who is he? Where is he? They want Screech, and Screech doesn't exist. And people make mistakes. And they apologize. And you either, who am I not to say, it's okay with me?
Right.
And he said some harsh things, I heard. But I loved him then, and I still love him.
Peter Engel is here. I Was Saved by the Bell is the book. We're talking about Saved by the Bell. You mentioned casting Screech and you misread his birth certificate. Let's talk about some of the other casting situations, maybe things we learned about after the fact with Saved by the Bell. A.C. Slater, you thought was going to be a paisan from maybe Staten Island or Brooklyn or somebody.
Well, he was an Army brat, and I based him on John Travolta from Saturday Night Live with a leather jacket. Saturday Night Fever, not Saturday Night, right. Saturday Night Fever. And I didn't like the Slaters. I was seeing they all had attitude, but they weren't likable. So I called my casting director up one night after we'd been casting for several weeks, and I said, where is it written that Slater has to be Anglo? She said, well, you wrote it that way. I said, well, change it. Bring me African Americans, bring me Latinos, bring me Asians, bring me anyone. The next day she called me and said, I found Slater. And we never even dealt with the fact that his father's name was Sanchez and changed it to get into West Point in a day when they didn't take many Hispanics or Latinos. And we didn't until the college years, like 5 years later, where Zach says to him, I always thought you were Italian. When and the week we did it, it was a Latino protest show we were doing, and same thing was taking place at UCLA that week, oddly enough. And Lark Voorhees. Lisa Turtle, I wrote as a Jewish American princess from Great Neck, Long Island.
Somebody you actually knew, right?
Oh, I knew, yes, who was a mall queen who moves to California. And we only had one script. And they brought Lark in for a meet and greet and for down the road. They said, well, have a read. They said, read what? I said, after I met her. I said, have a read of Lisa Turtle. And casting director said, she's not black. I said, she is now. And that's how it happened. Mark Paul Gosselaar had dyed his hair brown blonde for a show, which is not in the book, for a show he had done on PBS for a movie just before. I mean, if he had come in with brown hair, I would have hired him anyway. Mm-hmm. The minute he walked in the room, I said, if this kid speaks English, he's got the part. He had that sparkle in his eye.
Right.
And of course, Tiffany and Elizabeth were wonderful.
Especially with casting Lark in Mario, do you look back on that now, that being such a different time in our country, and I would imagine in Hollywood as well, for you to have two minorities and a black woman on the show, and for it to be so successful? I mean, did you realize then that you were kind of breaking ground in a sense and breaking down a barrier? Or?
Well, I didn't. We just did it, and then all of a sudden I got all these awards. I got, when the Academy gave out the first diversity award, Bill Cosby, when he was Bill Cosby, and the FCC commissioner, Bill called me a hero. But I didn't think I was doing anything great except casting the best people possible, and I didn't think of it that way. Now, when the box set came out 2 Christmases ago, they were always out, but the DVD box set, there were special features. And a USC professor, University of Southern California, said it was the first, when Zach kissed Lisa, it was the first black and white scripted kiss, which it wasn't, but it was like the third. Okay, and I didn't even realize that. So I called up one of my guys who had run one of my showrunners and said, did we ever consider the black and white, there's a black and white kiss? He said, no, we got 12,000 letters. How could Zach do that to Screech? There was not one letter about it being black or white.
Wow.
And when that happened, I said, I think we've done our job. There were thousands. How could Zach do that to Screech? How could he kiss Lisa? And of course, in that episode at the end, we can't do this. My friendship is too important with Screech.
Peter Engel is here. You leave Hollywood for a little bit. Again, you talk about kind of new and fertile ground, first with this tween programming block it turns into, and then you leave and you become a dean of communications at a school, right?
Yes.
So how did that happen?
Jeez. In the book, it's called The Fake Dean Story. I had met Pat Robertson when I had become a born-again Jewish Christian. Mm-hmm. I was not famous, but I got to know them all. And Pat, and I was a commencement speaker that one year. And they had just built a 150,000 square foot communications building, and I was going through a hard time in my life. I was divorced. I didn't know if Last Comic Standing was going to work past 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. Turned out to be 9 years. My son, who was living with me at the beach, was going off to college, my youngest boy, and Pat came and offered me the deanship. And I thought, well, geez, this could be. And I would still be able to do Last Comic if it continued, which it did. And the only problem was I was going across the country to Virginia, and it was great for about 4 days. I always had this dream of walking across. I always had this dream of walking across the campus and kids coming up to me, and it was idyllic. And until I realized, what the hell am I doing here? and but I was there, but fortunately I'd go, I was on the road quite a bit for last comic, because I came back for our second year, which was the best year, and I was the dean of communications at Regent University in Virginia Beach, and and my nephew said, "You're the fake dean," and so I was the dean in 4 days, and I really had nothing to do. I mean, I had this huge building. And I remember Mel Gibson came down to screen for about 6 of us, Pat and I and a few others, the Passion of Christ movie. And it was a long version. It was really violent. And I'm sitting next to him in the screening room, and I'm going, oh my gosh. So the screening's over, we're going to dinner. And I see Pat's face, and it's white as a ghost. He goes, brother, you've got to tell him it's too violent. I said, me? Why do I have to tell him? You're the producer. I said, well, you're the head of the Christian right wing. You got to tell him. And the two of us are arguing. Who's going to tell him? And you got to tell him. Well, you got to tell him. I'm not telling him. Well, I'm not telling him. Finally, I prevailed. Somehow I prevailed. And Pat said, Peter has no. I said, I have nothing to say. And Peter has something to tell you, Pat, Mel. And I have nothing to say. In fact, I have to catch a plane. We're shooting in Vegas. I got to catch an early plane. And Pat told them. But the whole concept of the two of us arguing in a hall, the head of the Christian right and me, the Jew from New York who believes in Jesus, we're fighting over who's going to tell Mel Gibson his movie's too violent. And that's one of the stories in the book. It's a book story. It's a bunch of stories.
That's hilarious. Oh, before we wrap up real quick, Peter Engel is here again. Last comic standing, the thing you're most proud about from that series?
What I'm most proud about, I was that a woman finally won. Okay, Amy Schumer didn't win. Amy came in. She was a finalist, but she was only 19. But Iliza Schlesinger won. And what I'm most proud of is that all the guys, once she got to the House, there were challenges, and all the guys, week after week, there were 4 challenges before you got down to the last 5. So you're eliminating 5. 4 of the 5 weeks, guys were challenging her, and she kept winning and winning and winning. So we now get to the episode where people are going to vote to see who wins. And so there are 5. And the 4 guys, I wrote each one of them in Vegas coming down the staircase into this big theater, why they should be the last comic standing. And I wrote, this guy said, I should be the last comic standing, but I'm the funniest, or I'm this or that. But Iliza came down last, and I wrote for her, I should be the last comic standing. And I said to her, when you say this, put your fist up in the air, because I beat all the guys. And she raised her fist. The audience went berserk, and she won.
And got a very nice career now as well.
She does.
Very nice
She's
career
terrific.
now.
She's a lovely woman.
Again, the name of the book, I Was Saved by the Bell, Peter Engel. Appreciate you making some time, and enjoy the time that you have here in New York City.
Thank you.